Sagittarius, the hidden hand that tried to break you, Archangel Michael's protection. A moments in life when the air feels heavier, when the room you step into carries a chill you cannot name, and when the smiles you see don't quite reach the eyes you remember. You may have wondered if you were imagining it, if your intuition was simply overactive, but deep down a quiet voice within has always known. That voice, your oldest companion, has been whispering to you through uneasy dreams, sudden hesitations, and the strange timely disruptions that have altered your path. I am not here to teach you something entirely new. I am here to echo back the truths you have sensed but never dared to name. You, Sagittarius, are a seeker of light, a wanderer of the wide-open roads of both the world and the soul. Yet even the freest spirit sometimes finds that someone has tried to tether their wings, not out of love but out of envy, fear, or a darkness that cannot bear to see you fly. The pain is not only in the act itself, but in discovering that such shadows can be cast by those once held close to your heart. And yet you are still here. You are still breathing, still walking, still seeking. That is not an accident. There is a reason you have escaped situations you could not explain. There is a reason a quiet warning has kept you from stepping into certain rooms, signing certain deals, or reopening certain doors. In the invisible places beyond sight, something or someone has been watching over you. So before we step into this deeper journey, take a breath. Place your hand on your heart. Feel that steady rhythm that belongs to no one else. This is your compass. As we walk through the gates ahead together, I will ask you to remember, not with fear but with clarity, to name the truth, not to harden but to heal. And if these words resonate, I invite you to linger here a little longer. Share this space with others who need to hear it. Let's walk this path with light, with honesty, and with the unwavering knowing that you, dear Sagittarius, are never truly alone. Gate 1: The weight of shadows. When trust turns against you. Sagittarius, your journey has always been marked by a hunger for truth and an unshakable belief in the goodness of life. You walk into the world with open arms, eager to experience its richness, and you often give people the benefit of the doubt. You see the potential in them long before they see it in themselves. But even for a soul as resilient as yours, there comes a time when you must face the reality that not every hand extended toward you carries pure intent. Somewhere along your path, there was someone who did not simply drift away from you by chance. They stepped aside with precision, with calculation, and perhaps with the silent hope that you would stumble. This is not about paranoia, nor is it about painting others in black and white. It is about naming a truth your soul has already recorded. This person may not have been a stranger. In fact, the ache lies in how familiar they once were. They could have been a trusted friend, a partner who shared your quietest nights, or a family member who knew your dreams and fears better than anyone. They didn't need to openly attack you. They only needed to know where your light was most vulnerable, and in moments you didn't see coming, they used that knowledge, whether through deliberate betrayal or careless disclosure, to place obstacles in your path. Sometimes harm comes not from the one wielding the blade, but from the one who opens the door for the blade to enter. You may recall times when opportunities slipped through your fingers without explanation. Projects that fell apart, relationships that cooled without reason, invitations that never arrived. It's tempting to chalk these moments up to bad luck, but Sagittarius, luck had little to do with it. These were ripples from an undercurrent you could not see. I once spoke to a Sagittarius woman who had prepared for an important career leap. She had the skills, the network, and the drive. Yet, just days before a pivotal meeting, a close friend casually mentioned her plans to a third party, someone with the power and perhaps the motive to influence the decision against her. The deal was quietly withdrawn. She never received an explanation, only a polite, "not at this time." Months later, she discovered the truth. The betrayal wasn't in the rejection. It was in the misplaced trust that led to it. It is hard for you, Sagittarius, to believe such things because your nature leans toward optimism. You have an instinctive faith in the arc of justice, a belief that sincerity will be met with sincerity. But life, as you've begun to see, doesn't always operate on that symmetry. Some people cannot hold the brightness you carry without feeling the shadow it casts within themselves. Your light, instead of inspiring them to rise, becomes a mirror they are not ready to face. And so, they choose to dim it, not because you deserve it, but because it is easier than confronting their own darkness. This is not a call to mistrust everyone you meet. It is an invitation to see clearly, without romanticizing those who have already shown you their limits. Forgiveness, yes, but forgiveness is not the same as permission. The lesson here is that your openness is sacred, and it must be protected with discernment. You do not need to harden your heart, Sagittarius. You only need to learn which doors to keep closed. As you stand at this first gate, I want you to remember a simple truth. The moment you begin to protect your light with the same devotion you offer to others, you become untouchable in ways the world cannot explain. No whispered word, no quiet sabotage, no unseen hand can truly bring down what is guarded both by your own awareness and by the forces that walk beside you. And those forces, they have been closer than you think, intervening in moments when your intuition whispered, "Not this way." You may not have known it then, but those whispers were never yours alone. Gate 2, the chapter that ended without your consent. Sagittarius, endings have a way of reshaping the map of your life before you even realize you are holding a new one. Sometimes they arrive like the turning of a season, subtle, almost invisible, until one day you wake up and the air feels different. Other times they come as abrupt storms, tearing away the very ground you stood on. But for you, the hardest endings have never been the loud, dramatic ones. They have been the quiet departures, the sudden silences, the relationships and dreams that dissolved without a clear reason. Perhaps you've known the hollow ache of losing something you weren't ready to release. A friendship that had been a constant for years suddenly feels distant, conversations turn shallow, and messages go unanswered. You search for the moment it all began to fade, but there is no single cause you can name. It's as if you've been written out of a story you helped build. The worst part is not the absence itself. It's the unanswered questions, the way your mind replays the last moments in a loop, looking for signs you missed. I once listened to a Sagittarius man recount how he had invested years in building a shared dream with someone he trusted completely. The plan was clear. They would start a business together, blending his vision with their connections. But just before launching, he received a short, clinical message. "I've decided to go in another direction." No explanation. No meeting. Within weeks, he learned they had taken the idea, reshaped it, and launched without him. He told me it wasn't the loss of the business that haunted him. It was the sudden erasure of all the trust and laughter that had once been the foundation of that partnership. For a free spirit like you, Sagittarius, endings can feel like cages. Your instinct is to keep moving, to find the open horizon beyond the pain. But the truth is, unprocessed endings don't stay behind. They echo in the choices you make, the people you let in, the opportunities you hesitate to claim. If you carry the weight of unanswered goodbyes, it seeps into your energy like a shadow, subtly steering your path without your consent. And yet, there is something sacred in endings, even the ones forced upon you. They are the universe's way of rerouting you from roads that no longer serve your highest self. What feels like loss now may, in time, reveal itself as the exact disruption needed to place you where you truly belong. Think back to the times you were devastated by a door closing, only to discover a better one down the road, a door you would have never approached if the first had remained open. But this acceptance doesn't happen instantly. There is a period of mourning, even for those who pride themselves on resilience. You may want to rush past it, to distract yourself with new adventures, but this gate asks you to pause, to honor the grief however inconvenient it feels, to say, "Yes, this ending hurt me," without needing to dilute it with, "But it's fine." Because it's not just fine, it's real, it's human, and it matters. When you allow yourself to acknowledge the pain without judgment, you create space for something else to enter, release. And release is not about pretending the ending never happened. It's about reclaiming the energy you've unconsciously left in the places, people, and plans that no longer walk beside you. The moment you gather that energy back, you stop chasing what's already gone and start building what's meant to arrive. Sagittarius, the chapter that ended without your consent was never the final chapter. It was only the end of a story that could no longer hold the full expanse of your becoming. The pages ahead are blank, and your hand is steady. You are not being asked to forget, but to write again, with wisdom, with courage, and with the quiet knowing that every forced ending is an unspoken beginning in disguise. Gate 3, the soul bonds that defy logic. Sagittarius, for all your love of freedom, there are connections you cannot simply walk away from. They are not bound by contracts, shared addresses, or even daily conversations. They live in the unseen space between two souls, pulsing with a familiarity that feels older than this lifetime. These are the soul bonds, the inexplicable threads that tie you to another's energy, regardless of how far your feet or years may carry you. You may have felt it in the first few seconds of meeting someone, the sudden recognition in their eyes, as if you've been carrying a memory of them without knowing it. Or perhaps you've dreamt of a person before you ever spoke their name, only to later discover they were living a parallel story to yours. These connections don't always come wrapped in comfort. Sometimes they arrive to soothe you, but often, they come to awaken something dormant inside. Something that cannot be stirred by anyone else. I once spoke to a Sagittarius woman who described meeting someone in a crowded cafe. She'd been busy, distracted, with no interest in starting a new relationship. But when their eyes met, the noise around her dulled into silence. The conversation that followed felt less like an introduction, and more like a continuation of something left unfinished long ago. Over the months, they discovered eerily similar life patterns. Shared fears, identical turning points, even the same obscure childhood book that had shaped their worldview. "It's like he knows my soul," she told me. "But it's not always gentle. Sometimes it's like he's holding up a mirror to parts of myself I'd rather not see." That is the nature of soul bonds. They are not here to let you stay asleep. They stir your deepest truths to the surface, for better or for worse. Sometimes they are the most beautiful love stories you will ever know. Other times they are the catalyst for your most painful growth. And sometimes they are both at once. But Sagittarius, here is where your gift comes in. You were born with the instinct to explore not just the world, but the inner landscapes of the heart. This means you are uniquely able to navigate the paradox of a soul bond, to love without clinging, to learn without losing yourself. Still, the challenge lies in knowing when to hold on and when to let go. A connection can be profound without being permanent. The depth of feeling does not always dictate the duration of its place in your life. There will be bonds that test your trust, your patience, even your faith. Some will reflect the best of you, while others will trigger the wounds you've kept hidden. Yet in each case, there is an invitation to meet yourself more fully through the mirror of another's presence. And sometimes the most profound act of love for both souls is to step back, allowing the connection to breathe, to shift, or even to dissolve if it has completed its work. The risk in such bonds is that they can blur your boundaries, especially when the pull is intense. You might excuse harmful behavior because it feels meant to be, or stay in cycles of hurt because we have history. But a true soul bond will not ask you to diminish yourself to keep it alive. If a connection demands that you shrink, that is not destiny, it is a lesson. And the lesson may be to choose yourself, even when every thread in your being longs to hold on. You will know a soul bond is aligned when, even in its challenges, it leaves you more whole than it found you. You will feel expanded, not depleted, inspired, not erased. And you will find that the connection, whether lasting or fleeting, was never about possession. It was about recognition. Sagittarius, cherish these bonds for what they are. Living reminders that the heart's map stretches far beyond the physical world. Let them teach you, let them move you, but never forget, you are the keeper of your own soul. No bond, however ancient, holds the right to decide your worth or your path. That choice will always belong to you. Gate for the awakening that softens the soul. Sagittarius, there comes a moment in every seeker's life when the journey shifts from running toward something to standing still, and realizing it has been within you all along. This is not the moment of triumph people imagine, the waving of flags, the victorious arrival at some grand destination. No, awakening rarely looks like that. It is quieter. It arrives like dawn breaking after a long night, when you are too tired to celebrate and yet profoundly aware that the darkness has lifted. You may not even notice it at first. It could be in the way your breath feels deeper, or how you no longer tense at the thought of certain names. The memories are still there, but their edges have softened. You recall the betrayal, the loss, the unanswered questions, but they no longer pierce you. They have become part of your story, not the defining chapter. That is the hallmark of awakening, when the past no longer dictates the shape of your future. I once guided a Sagittarius man who had been carrying the weight of an old wound for years. He spoke of it often, not in bitterness, but with a heaviness that slowed everything in his life. One day, after months of inner work, he came into our session and simply said, "I think I'm done telling that story." He wasn't pretending it never happened. He wasn't forcing forgiveness. He had simply outgrown the version of himself who needed to hold it so tightly. That Sagittarius is what awakening feels like, not an explosion but a release. And yet, awakening is not just about letting go, it is about letting in. It is about welcoming the subtle guidance you once doubted, the intuitive tugs, the inner pauses, the sense that unseen hands are steering you away from harm. This is when you begin to see the patterns of protection that have been with you all along. You remember the sudden changes of plan that spared you from unseen dangers, the doors that closed only to lead you to better ones, the strange sense of peace that came in moments you should have felt alone. These were not accidents. They were signs of a light walking with you. One you may call Archangel Michael, the universe, your higher self, or simply love. Awakening also changes the way you see others. The people who hurt you are no longer enemies in your eyes. You begin to understand that their actions came from their own unhealed places, not to excuse them but to see clearly. And with this clarity comes a new kind of strength. The ability to protect your heart without building a fortress around it. You can say no without anger, and yes without fear. You can set boundaries not from a place of punishment, but from deep self-respect. Most of all, awakening returns you to your natural state. Openness. But this openness is different from before. It is no longer the wide, unguarded field where anyone can walk in and take what they please. It is a cultivated garden, beautiful, abundant, but tended with care. You decide who steps inside and you trust yourself to choose wisely. Sagittarius, this gate is the turning point. You are no longer running from your wounds or seeking proof of your worth in others' hands. You are anchored in yourself, and that anchoring gives you freedom. From here, every step is lighter, every decision clearer, and every connection more aligned. You see now that the light you carry was never fragile. It only needed you to believe in it as fiercely as it has always believed in you. Conclusion: the road beyond the gates. Sagittarius, we have walked together through the shadows and into the light, past betrayal, loss, the pull of soul bonds, and the quiet, steady arrival of awakening. Each gate was not just a chapter in your story, but a mirror reflecting back the truth you have carried all along. You are not fragile, you are forged. The weight you once bore has been transformed into strength, not by erasing the past, but by integrating it into the tapestry of who you are now. You began this journey perhaps with questions. Why did this happen? How could they do this? Will I ever feel whole again? And here you are, breathing more deeply, seeing more clearly, and feeling the subtle shift of power returning to where it always belonged, within you. The people who once tried to dim your light have become characters in a chapter that no longer defines you. The endings you never chose have cleared the space for beginnings you cannot yet imagine. The bonds that stirred your soul, whether they stayed or left, have given you a more intimate understanding of yourself. And the awakening you stepped into has placed you firmly in the truth that you are guided, protected, and profoundly connected to something far greater than fear. Now the road stretches ahead, wide, sunlit, and calling your name. You no longer need to chase validation or guard your heart in silence. You carry both softness and strength, knowing they are not opposites but companions. This is the gift of your Sagittarius spirit. To walk forward with curiosity unbroken, even after the storms. To love again, not because you forgot the pain, but because you remember the light. So as you step beyond these gates, I invite you to keep this truth close. Your story is not over. In fact, the most luminous chapters are still waiting for your pen. If these words have touched something within you, share them with those who may need a lantern for their own dark nights. Subscribe to this journey, not for me, but for the part of you that knows the power of walking together in light. Because in this space you are never alone, and you never will be.